Hey friends, welcome back to the Be Fabbo Podcast. This is episode 136, and today's conversation is going to be about boundaries. I am your host, Bobbi Brinkman. Welcome if you're new here, if you're an OG being around for a while. As always, welcome back. Privileged to share space with you today. Before we talk about boundaries, I want to start with a word that almost nobody uses when they talk on this topic, or when we expand or just have general sit down over coffee and we all talk as entrepreneurs about boundaries and how we need to be better at having them. It's resentment. I think because resentment is where every honest conversation about boundaries really begins. So think about that. I think that resentment is a word that we all know, which is why we say yes, which is why we don't say no, which is why we say no, and then we think, oh man, we should have said yes, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. There was a season in my life, in my business, when I did give without limits at the very, very beginning. I didn't take everybody as a client. I didn't photograph everybody, but I would do some different jobs from that were outside of weddings or family portraits. And I started my career as a sports photographer that's segueing to weddings. So I would go do maybe a golf tournament or maybe a youth golf tournament, or somebody would ask me to come and shoot their photograph. Let's do the word photograph instead of shoot. We don't need to use any more of that in our world today, right? So I would come and photograph. They want me to come and photograph their kids' recital or their kids' practice. And I would get these emails. And every extra request, I often would accommodate without question. I would say, okay, sure, I'm going to be in the neighborhood. I'll come over on Thursday evening and I'll photograph the team, because they didn't have a team photographer. Later on in my career, I built a team of team photographers, and we had high schools and colleges and youth groups and YMCAs and McDonald's. We had all those underneath our umbrella of the work that we do. But I would generally say, sure, I can do that. Every boundary quietly moved because saying no felt harder in the moment than saying yes, especially if the call was from a dad who had already invested in my business, who lived down the road from my studio, who every single holiday, birthdays would hire me and would bring their kids into the studio. Same with the mom that was in the Mother's Club. Hey, can you donate this portrait session for our PTA and for our fundraiser? When they were already clients, I always felt I needed to say yes. And I told myself, I'm doing this for generosity. I believe I'm being generous. I'm sharing my gifts. I'm doing what I need to do. I'm giving you back something because you gave something to me. I felt that showing up fully for these people who asked me for something was what good service looked like. That being available and responsive and giving, and then giving a little bit more. And then every year or every other month, it became, can you do this? Can you do this? Pretty soon I was doing so many gift certificates that I wasn't creating income to keep things rolling. I was having more people on my schedule that were coming for some of the things that I generously donated, instead of those clients that I worked so hard to get, and the clients that were referring people to me, they couldn't get in. And it wasn't because I was so busy. It was because of being generous by constantly saying yes. I needed to learn a boundary. That being available when my current clients needed me was something that I had to do, because that's how real businesses and legit artists are taken seriously. And then I looked up one day and I was like, wow, I'm resenting giving out all these gift certificates. I'm resenting taking up a Thursday evening instead of going and hanging out with some friends. Remember, I love photography. I have no children, so I love being behind the camera and capturing moments. I love sports. So a Thursday night at a T-ball game, watching these next generation of baseball players was fun. But I was giving up my Thursday evening where I could have maybe booked another type of session, right? And the resentment wasn't toward any particular specific client or any school or a function or an organization, not toward the work itself, which I generally love and I miss to this day, but it was toward the version of myself that kept saying yes long past the time where I need to say, thank you for supporting me. How can I do something in a different way? Instead of giving 10 certificates, how about if we do a drawing or we do something else, another way that I could work? The resentment stopped me cold and I wasn't prepared for it. because I had built an identity around generosity. I talk about it. I believe if we're making an impact and we're here to make an impact, and I believe that the more profitable we become, we need to share what we have. We need to give back. And if you can't give back by writing a check or making a donation, we give back with our time. I knew I wanted to be I knew I was building a business on generosity because that is who I am, right? And so when I was showing up as someone without the limits and without any boundaries, the resentment felt like I was a betrayal of the identity that I was trying to build. As somebody that gives back to the community and supports the community, I was beginning to be taken advantage of by that community in my view, and resentment set in. And then I understood something that changed how I thought about giving. Resentment isn't something you feel guilty about. It's information. It's your life quietly telling you that something you've been giving was never really yours to give away. And that started to become my map. Not a map of what organization, as I said, or what client was wrong, but a map back to what mattered most in the business I was trying to build in the first place. So let me reframe boundaries completely, because I think most people think of them in a different way, and not a right or wrong way, but I think we forget sometimes that this is how we need to look at boundaries, right? I think most people think of boundaries as walls, as limits that restrict what you give, and something that you might put up to protect yourself at the expense of those that you serve. But I don't really think that is a boundary. I don't really think that's a true definition of a boundary. I started reframing this, and I started thinking that if I stop thinking about boundaries as walls, I can think of them as decisions that I've already made, and I have to move on. They're part of the business that I built, and this is where I am now. And when I say yes to an organization that I didn't say yes to before, and when I say no to a long-term organization, I need to create a different way to still serve them, but not be giving so much freely so that I could relieve that resentment, because I wanted to still be generous with my gifts, right? I wanted to still serve. And when you give what you have been chosen to give fully from a place of genuine care rather than quiet obligation, the quality of what you give transforms. And I witnessed this firsthand. The person on the receiving end, the client that generally got a gift certificate, because I had a client purchase a gift certificate and then they would donate it to a family that they felt was deserving. And when I use the word deserving, I'm not meaning in a bad way. I just means they know someone that maybe has been in their home and seen the photographs that I took of their kids and their children, their activities. And the person says, I've never had a family photo. We really couldn't afford it. So instead of me saying no to a charity, I would reach out and say, how about somebody here that already has me as a client, purchases from me so I can control the number, and I could have better control of when they would come in and schedule, instead of giving 10 gift certificates for portraits and then the people all come to me at Christmas. I had to change how they were used, how they were going to be received, and how I was going to perform them. I had to put some time limits on them, right? But when I do so, the person on the receiving end got the real version of my generosity, not the depleted exhaustion because, oh my gosh, your gift card number 7 and you're all coming in today. Today is gift card day. And I felt depleted because they always pushed for more, right? And maybe they weren't my right fit clients to begin with, but I needed to now trust my clients instead of just broadly having Susie bid on a portrait. I reshifted how the decisions I made to be generous were going to be received, right? And I started to get past that resentment. A boundary doesn't limit your generosity. It makes your generosity real. So I want you to think honestly about what you're building right now, what the thing that you are building, not in the big dramatic way, not in the big profit or how much money you're making, in the quiet accumulating ones. The obligation that costs more energy than it gives back. The availability that gradually became assumed rather than constantly chosen, right? The availability where we'll just call Bobbi and she'll give us a gift certificate. Or, hey, we'll call Tom and he'll give us 12 lawn services. It's assumed instead of let's choose Tom because he can do this. Let's see what Tom can come up with that would benefit Tom as well as the people that we want to have a donation for. The expectation that you accommodated once and then again and again until you accommodate it simply because that's what you felt you always did, that was expected. And we need to change that from the default. And that is where resentment builds. Not in that big decision, but in those small ones that you were never quite made consciously, that you never made it by thinking. You just were like, here, sure, do this. Here, let me donate this space. Here's 75 portraits, or here is 10 things to do this, or whatever it is. You didn't sit back and think about it. Those small yeses that were given without fully choosing them because you felt you had to do that. And the beautiful thing about understanding resentment as a map rather than a character flaw is that it shows you exactly where the decision is still waiting to be made. You don't have to do don't have to do anything dramatic. You don't have to give 10 portrait sessions or 10 lawn care sessions or 10, massages or a bouquet a month. You have to think of a different way to have a difficult conversation that will benefit, to send that difficult email that will benefit instead of blowing up a relationship that you built. That is everybody growing, because as the organizations you work with grow and you grow, sometimes they want to remind you that maybe they put you on that map. And you need to remind them that these are the gifts that you're sharing and that you're still building a business. But how can you serve their clients while also still serving you and being honest to your clients and holding your clients that you already have to the level of appreciation because they've been there and they've been investing with you from the get-go. You just have to make the decision that you've been avoiding. That's all a boundary really is, a decision finally made. Here's the practice I want to offer you that has made more difference for me than almost anything else when what I built. Name your non-negotiables. Not your preferences. Name the things that would be nice to protect. The real things that you will not give up regardless of business pressure or client expectation or the uncomfortable feeling of disappointing someone out of fear of them talking bad about you, out of fear of them saying you're not a community team player. Don't let somebody guilt you into being generous. Maybe your non-negotiables are your health. Maybe it's dinner every Sunday evening with your family, so no Sunday portraits. Maybe it's your creative time where I'm going to come in my studio and I'm going to photograph some things for me, or I'm going to be gone this weekend to do pottery. Maybe it's simply having enough energy left to enjoy the life that you've been working so hard to build. And please, treat yourself like your VIP client. Write down your vacations. Write down the weekends off. Talk at the beginning of the year and say, here is the weekends we're not working. If it's around every holiday, so be it. You all know what's going to happen. The minute you write off a weekend, the biggest client that you've been waiting for is coming knocking at the door. I'm going to challenge you to take the weekend off. You run your business your way. Build what matters most by your definition. But come up with those negotiables, right? Maybe it's simply having enough energy left to live this life that you've been working so hard to build. Don't write them down as nice to haves, but as decisions already made. Because when those things are named and you name them clearly and you hold them as non-negotiables, the yes and no decisions that follow become remarkably easier. You're not negotiating from scratch every time. You're simply honoring something that you've already decided. And decisions made in advance are so much easier, my friends, to keep than decisions that are made in the moment under pressure and chaos. So this week, do this something specific. Find one place in where you're building. Find one place in your goals or your to-do list. And right now, where is resentment quietly living? Take a look. Next month, next quarter, next year, something that we're going to do. Maybe it is that gift card to the school. Maybe it's showing up and donating 800 cookies, or maybe it's showing up at a fair behind a table on music night somewhere. Find that place where resentment is quietly living. Not to blame anyone, not to blame yourself, not to make it dramatic. Just name it. Write down what boundary is missing there. What decision has not been made. What you have been giving that you never fully chose to give. You didn't sign up for every single Thursday to have a booth at the school's band events. You said you do it once. And then you got the call, somebody can't be there. Can you still bring a booth? We want to make sure that we have enough booths. You honored your commitment. You made the decision to do it once. Stick with that. Now, I'm not here to tell you that it might ruin a relationship or it might not foster a relationship. You have to decide that. I'm just giving you permission to write some non-negotiables. I want you to give yourself permission to build a business that supports the life that you want, where profit, purpose, and joy will follow. And they're the goals. They're the results, not the goal. Find yourself some non-negotiables. Do that. Just find one thing this week, because every real boundary protects something that matters. The question isn't whether you need boundaries. The question you should be asking yourself is, what are these boundaries protecting? You and the people you serve will be better for it, my friends, every single time. So that wraps up this conversation on boundaries. You want to go deeper? You know where to find me over on Substack. Follow along weekly over there on notes. It's all in the show notes. Find, subscribe. It's free, or I have a paid version if you want to go deeper. But that's what we talk about every week. We have the same topic that we talk about here in the podcast, only I go deeper and long-form content and some notes. Until then, my friends, protect what matters most and go build it. I'll see you back here next week.